Takaru was an orphan loser stuck in a doomed timeline until he woke up screaming from a nightmare where the aliens devoured Earth and left him the last man standing. Now, armed with memories of a war that hasn't happened yet, he's got one shot to rewrite history, riz up an entire mech squadron, and outsmart an alien horde before they turn humanity into Happy Meals. But before any of this, in 1973, a group of alien creatures sends a landing ship from the moon, and it lands on Earth. After that, humans end up in a full war against these aliens, and over time, the number of people on Earth drops to 1 billion. These aliens are called Beta, and they are very dangerous. By 1998, almost the entire huge Eurasian continent is taken over by Beta, and because of this, the world's population drops to about 2 billion. The Beta then starts attacking Japan and manage to take over almost half of the whole country. At the tactical base, Commander Sakazaki Kori, along with Commander Suzuno, explains to Akiyoshi, Madoka and Sayako that they are TSF pilots who have been moved to a Japanese military base in Sadagashima, which is an important spot for defense. Commander Kori sends the others to train in the TSF simulator, but she gives Kasano a different task. She pairs him up with Sayako as her wingman and tells him to show her around the base. Later, as Sayako gets ready, she asks Kasano about the 2 TSF battalions that were supposed to be stationed at the base. He tells her that those battalions were actually sent to Niigata as extra support to help hold off the Beta forces that are moving in. However, Sayako asks if the plan now is just to have new pilots fill in the gap left behind, and Kasano says that it is, since he himself only came from Yokohama just a week ago. Later, Sayako opens up to Kasano, telling him that her old squad mates were also full of spirit and wanted to protect their hometowns too, but sadly, half of them never made it back. After that, as she looks around the whole area, she asks if the civilians were at least told to leave, but Kasano explains that while the evacuation order was given, most people chose to stay because they couldn't bear to leave the place they had lived in their whole lives. In September 1998, a huge number of Beta are spotted moving into the sea near Sakata, and it's believed they will reach Sadagashima by the next morning. At the same time, over at Sato, the warning alarms suddenly go off as a large group of Beta begins heading toward the first alert line. The army commander quickly orders all units to start their defensive attacks. Soon after, the Beta pushes past the first line and reaches the second one, and Sayako starts preparing herself to join the battle. While the Navy ships attack the Beta forces out at sea, the Beta doesn't stop and just keeps pushing forward. Sayako gets ready to launch in her Alpha unit to help defend the base. Once she's in the fight, they fire at the Beta and manage to take down some of them. After the first round of battle, Sayako returns to base to finish her resupply and quickly gets ready to go back out again. After the Brave Squadron finishes clearing the 5th wave, it's time for Alpha Squadron to go, but then a new Beta appears at the same coordinates as the Brave Squad. However, a huge Beta suddenly appeared from underground. It's a Fortman class, one of the massive types, and it starts smashing some of the squadron robots in battle. Right after that, the commanders quickly alert the Alpha Squadron and order them to move out right away, since the Fort-class Beta has shown up near radio point 5606. At the same time, Japan is starting to run low on reinforcements, and some people wonder if the United States will step in to help, but there's no answer from them either. Meanwhile, all the squadron robots on the battlefield are being destroyed one after another by Beta. But then, the Alpha Squadron finally arrives and starts attacking the Fortman-class Beta with their powerful 120mm rounds. They all rush toward the Fortman-class Beta, throwing their rocket launchers at it, and after a strong hit, the Fortman finally goes down. Right after that, the Alpha Squadron moves on to attack another Beta and fires their weapons. But things take a dark turn when one of the Beta falls directly on top of Kasano, and no one is able to get to him in time. At first, it looks like he somehow survives the fall, but then the Beta's acid spills on him, killing him instantly. Even though Sayako and the rest of the base's defenders fight with everything they have, the Beta forces keep coming and finally break through the defenses, starting to take over the whole area. Sayako, full of rage, starts firing at the Beta wildly like a maniac. Then, another squadron member named Murata gets hit and taken down. Right after that, the Laser-class Beta arrives on the battlefield, and the commander starts to question whether their TSF units can even hold up against this kind of threat. But it becomes clear that, with the few forces they have left, they simply can't. After that, the Warrior-class Beta show up in the city and start brutally killing the soldiers, even beheading them without mercy. Then, they charge straight toward the residential area and wipe out all the civilians who are still there. Instead of being told to stay and fight, Sayako receives orders to escort the refugee transport and make sure the remaining people are safely evacuated. As she and the few survivors from Sadagashima leave the island behind, it is later revealed that the place they escaped from eventually turns into the location of the 21st Beta Hive. 3 years after the fall of Sato to the Beta, in the year 2001, Takeru Shirogane wakes up from what feels like a terrible nightmare. In the dream, humanity had launched the Alternative V plan, which meant sending a few 100,000 people to another planet to survive, while leaving everyone else behind to make a final stand against the Beta. Takeru can't stop thinking about how the whole world was falling apart and how he wasn't able to do anything about it. After pulling himself together, he gets dressed and ready for school, but as soon as he steps outside, he sees that the entire city around him has collapsed. Right near his house, he even spots a Gekishin standing there, making everything feel even more unreal. However, Takeru soon realizes that it wasn't just a dream. Everything he saw actually happened. He figures out that there are only 2 months left until the Alternative V plan is put into action, and everything around him is exactly the same as it was on that day, except now he still remembers it all. He runs through the city, seeing the ruins and destruction, and it hits him that he had already witnessed everything once before. Then he remembers seeing the ships that were heading into space, the changes that followed, and what it all means that the migrant fleet meant to carry people off the planet is already being built right now as he stands there. He then goes to the Yokohama base and finds 2 soldiers guarding the place. Takeru tells the soldiers that he doesn't have any ID, but he still wants to meet with Professor Kazuki. However, when the soldier checks with her, Professor Kazuki replies that she doesn't know anyone by that name. After that, one of the soldiers start beating Takeru, and he worries that if they manage to capture him, he'll be thrown into the stockade. In a panic, he fights back and manages to take down one of the guards. Just then, Professor Kazuki shows up. Takeru calls her sensei, but she looks confused and says she doesn't remember anything like that. So he quickly asks her if her research is making any progress, warning her that if she doesn't act soon, she'll end up regretting it all over again. However, Professor Kazuki decides to run a test first and puts Takeru inside an ultrasound machine to check if he's clear. After the scan, she finally sits down to talk with him. Kazuki asks him how he knows about the alternative plan, and Takeru explains that he heard about it on the evening of December 24th from the base commander. He then tells her something even more shocking. He says that he returned to a point in the past, and that he originally came from a different world, one where the Beta didn't even exist. He explains that there are many differences between that world and this one, with the biggest change being the presence of the Beta. He tells her that this version of Earth has been fighting a war against the Beta for 30 years. In that timeline, he ended up becoming a cadet and tried his best to help save the world, and on December 24th, they were informed that humanity was going ahead with Alternative 4, but they never told him about that Alternative 4 plan. Takeru tells her that there is not much time left, so she should find a way to fit 15 billion semiconducting parallel computing circuits into the palm of a hand. She then grabs her pistol and places in front of Takeru, who tells her that he wants to stop Alternative V and beat the Beta. However, Professor Kazuki says that his plan to somehow sabotage the alternative program sounds strange to her. But Takeru gets upset and asks if she really wants to let everyone left on Earth die. He then starts yelling at her, telling her that if she's really a genius, then she should act like one and do something to fix this situation before it's too late. Intrigued by what he knows and the way he talks, Kazuki decides to believe him for now and agrees to work with him. To keep things secret, she places him in the 207th TSF Training Squadron as a cover for their real plan. In October 2001, Takeru begins his training where pilots learn to operate tactical surface fighters, the giant machines used to fight the Beta, and take part in flight lessons to train how to fly them. For Takeru, everything is happening just like it did the first time around. During training, he runs into Maya, someone he clearly remembers from the other world, but to his surprise, she doesn't recognize him at all. Just then, their instructor Marimo shows up, just like before, ready to begin the day's training. Marimo then introduces Takeru to the other 4 girls in his training squad, who are also pilot cadets. One by one, they introduce themselves as Chizuru Sakaki, Maya Mitsurugi, Ayamine, and Miki Tamase. Mikoto Yoroi is missing from the group since she's currently in the hospital. After the introductions are done, their conditioning training starts. As they begin the exercises, Takeru remembers how things went in the other world and realizes that back then, he had been a real burden on these girls, even though they were all strong and skilled. Later in class, Takeru gives a great explanation of something his instructor asked, and that made all the girls down bad for him. However, Sakaki tells Takaru that if they can pass the CCSE, which is their current training course, then they'll be able to move on to real TSF training. Later, Takaru meets with Professor Kazuki and tells her that he plans to graduate from training flight and become a proper pilot, saying it's all part of his goal to help make sure Alternative 4 becomes a success. Kazuki questions him, asking if he's really trying to support a plan that he doesn't even fully understand. Takaru responds by saying that what he truly wants is to stop Alternative V from ever happening. In August 1999, the United Nations launches Operation Lucifer, a major military mission that ends with the successful capture of a beta hive located in Yokohama. A UN team is sent deep inside the hive and is shocked when they discover preserved human brains stored by the beta. Meanwhile, back in the present, Takaru continues with his training and ends up getting the highest scores in every session, thanks to the memories he still has from his past experience. One day, Takaru asks the others if there's something they each want to protect, because he believes that having something to protect is an important part of being human. He tells them that in order to defeat the beta, they'll need a group of strong-willed people, and that the only way they can win is if they all work together. After that, Takaru tells the girls that he wants to start calling them by nicknames that he'll make himself up. Instead of giving nicknames to all of them, he only calls Sakaki class rep, which surprises the others a bit. Later, Takaru decides to visit Kasumi Yashiro, who works as Professor Kazuki's lab assistant. When he first meets her, she gets startled by his sudden appearance and ends up running away. Takaru quickly follows her and introduces himself properly. When he asks her name and hears her say it, he suddenly realizes that he's heard the name Kasumi Yashiro somewhere before. After that, Takaru goes to meet with Professor Kazuki, and she asks him if he comes by just to see Yashiro. Instead of answering that, Takaru points to the emblem on Kasumi's shoulder and asks if it says, Alternative V, since he never noticed it in the other world. He then brings up someone named Sumika, telling Kazuki that when he crossed over from his original world, he saw many things that looked familiar, but Sumika wasn't anywhere to be found. He asks if Kazuki has found any trace of her at all, but she says she hasn't. That's when Takaru says that something about Kasumi reminds him a lot of Sumika. Takaru remembers that Sumika was the only person who ever called him Takaru-chan, and thinking about it makes him feel even more confused. Kazuki then tells him that Kasumi is actually one of the key people involved in the Alternative 4 plan. Takaru, still trying to figure everything out, asks her if the brain stored in that cylinder he saw earlier is also connected to the plan. Kazuki explains that yes, both the brain and Yashiro are two parts of the same set, meaning they're both important pieces of the bigger plan behind Alternative 4. However, Takaru asks her what exactly Alternative 4 means, to which she tells him that it's a plan that involves a single child bringing hope to all mankind. Takaru asks if that child is Kasumi, but Kazuki doesn't tell him yet. Kazuki asks him if he could actually change the course of history. On October 25th, 2001, Takaru and the others prepare for their loaded marching drills. And as they get ready, Takaru realizes that everything is happening exactly the same way it did in his memories. It all feels so familiar that it's almost scary. During a break, Kasumi asks him if anything new or different has happened compared to what he remembers from before, but Takaru replies that so far, nothing has changed. Later, Kazuki talks to him and says that maybe it's impossible to change the outcome at all. She then asks Takaru how he even got here in the first place, pointing out that the world he originally came from and the one he's in now are completely different from each other. She then explains that it's not hard to imagine a world where Earth never even formed, and yet somehow, Takaru ended up in a world almost exactly like his own, maybe just because he felt like he had something important to do here. Takaru admits that he's never heard of anything like this before and finds it hard to believe. Kazuki warns him that there could be consequences, both for him and for the people around him, all because of the way he traveled between different worlds. The next day, Takaru joins the others for more training. As he trains, he starts to wonder if the things he's doing are only making small changes that won't really matter in the end. While he's thinking about this, Makoto, the girl who was in the hospital, shows up with a big smile and says she's getting out of the hospital today. Takaru gets curious and asks her what day it is. When Makoto tells him it's already November, Takaru is shocked. He can't believe so much time has passed without him even noticing. 1 week later, Takaru goes to see Kazuki again and tells her that he has some really big news. The next morning, he talks to Kasumi and tells her not to worry if she hears the alarm go off. A few days before this, Takaru had already told Kazuki that the beta from Sadagashima is going to appear on the mainland, and that it will happen on November 11th. He then explains that the beta gathers together, breaks through the second line of defense, and change their path to move south along the final defense line in northern Kanto. So, he suggests that the safest thing to do is to wipe out the beta while they are still ashore. Because of Takeru's warning and knowledge from before, Kazuki gets the defenders ready early by putting them on alert, which helps them fight off the beta with way fewer people getting hurt or killed. 2 days later, Takeru and his friends take the comprehensive combat skill evaluation test. They manage to pass it, which means they now earn the right to become TSF pilots. The next day, Takeru and his friends take a break from all their work and spend some time relaxing at the beach. After their short vacation, they return to their regular training. Their instructor explains to everyone that they'll be using the control sticks found on the console armrests, and learning to use these well will let their TSFs move freely in all directions. During training, Takeru shoots down all the targets, but after running out of ammo, he pulls out his sword and finishes the rest that way. He ends up doing really well in the simulator training, mostly because of the experience he gained in the previous timeline and the video game skills he picked up in his original universe. After finishing the training, Takeru's teammates ask him what those moves were that he just did. Even his instructor looks surprised and asks if he really doesn't have any past experience with TSFs. Then Sakaki turns to the instructor and asks if Takeru is really that amazing. The instructor explains that the fastest time any cadet ever finished Course D was 5 days, but Takeru managed to complete it in just 1 day. This shocks everyone and leaves them completely speechless. Takeru asks the instructor if she can show his control logs to the rest of the squad. He thinks that if his techniques are really that good, then maybe everyone could learn from them and improve together. But the instructor tells him that Kazuki had actually made the same suggestion just the day before. She also explains that because of Kazuki's advice, the training plan for Takeru has already been changed and updated. She also says that their squad will have VIP access to the simulators until their training is completed, and their personal training units will be delivered tomorrow. Later, Kazuki finds Taika and says that she has some questions to ask him about his TSF maneuvers. The next day, thanks to Kazuki's help, the squadron gets their Fubuki training TSFs much faster than usual. Among the Fubuki units, there is also a special robot called Takamikazuchi, which is part of the Royal Guard. This one is purple and made just for Maya to use. Right after that, the Imperial Royal Guards show up and say they're there to make sure the Takamikazuchi is ready for Maya to use whenever she wants. Maya refuses to pilot it, and then a green-haired girl suddenly steps forward and looks at Takeru. She demands to know what he's doing here, saying that he should have died. She accuses him of changing the UN's database just so he could sneak into their facility. On November 25th, a group of people in the cafeteria start getting angry and demand to know who Takamikazuchi belongs to, but no one speaks up. It turns out they are officers, and they're especially mad at Takeru. But Takeru doesn't back down and tells them to leave him alone and mind their own business. One of the cadets suddenly punches Takeru hard, leaving him hurt and surprised. He starts to wonder if people like them would fight this fiercely if they were facing beta. Just then, Tsukuyumi arrives with Maya's other maids and steps in, asking the officers if this kind of behavior is really what UN pilots are being trained to do in public. She then loses her temper at the officer and yells that the UN didn't give him power just so he could use it for his own personal satisfaction. She tells him that the Takamikazuchi is here under the orders of both the Japanese government and the UN headquarters. Later on, Takeru is called in by his instructor, who tells him that she's going to handle the situation herself. She says it's because Lieutenant Tsukuyumi, who is currently stationed at the base, strongly insisted on it. The next day, Takeru starts his training again and quickly notices how new the Fubuki units feel. They move more smoothly and respond better than the older Gekishins he trained with before. As he gets used to the controls, Takeru starts wondering why TSF controls can't be made simpler, like in video games, where you can do combo moves or cancel automatic actions to react faster. While thinking about this, he remembers the times he used to play games with Sumika and how he would teach her how to do combo moves so she could land better hits during their matches. Later, Takeru talks to Kazuki about his idea. He tells her that there's a video game where many of the special moves he's been using in training can be learned by almost anyone with just a bit of practice. He explains that the game teaches players how to pull off tricky maneuvers step by step. Takeru then suggests that they should try using the simulator machine to copy and recreate the same kinds of moves he's been doing, so others can learn them too. Kazuki finds Takeru's idea interesting and agrees to go through with it. She plans to use Takeru and his friends as test pilots to see how well the changes work. The next day, Kasumi gives Takeru a picture of a Game Guy handheld gaming device, which surprises and confuses him because video games aren't supposed to exist in this timeline. Later, he hears that the UN Undersecretary is coming to visit Yokohama earlier than planned. Right away, Takeru warns Kazuki that this means the orbital HSSD will crash. Although hesitant at first, Kazuki agrees to help stop the crash. While looking into things further, Takaru finds out that the Yokohama base was actually built right on top of the ruins of the captured Yokohama hive. The next day, Takaru goes to the training class and sees Tamase crying. He asks what's wrong, and Maya tells him that the important person visiting tomorrow, the undersecretary, is actually Tamase's dad. But Takaru already knows that. It turns out the undersecretary's full name is Genjusai Tamase, and he really is her father. Tamase is upset because she accidentally made him think she's the flight commander of her squadron. Now she's scared he'll find out the truth and be disappointed in her. Takaru thinks for a moment, and then says he has a plan. He decides to let Tamase be the commander of the squadron for the day, so her dad won't find out she lied. Sometime later, Tamase's dad arrives at the Yokohama base, and the instructor introduces the group to him, saying they are the 207th Surface Pilot Cadet Flight. While that's happening, Tamase is shaking nervously in front of everyone. The instructor notices how scared she looks and quickly tells her dad that Tamase will be the one to show him around the campus. Right away, Tamase's dad changes completely and turns into a gentle, caring father. He smiles and says his daughter has really grown up. After that, Tamase walks him around the campus and shows him places like the shooting range, the training gym, and the cadet barracks. Later, Tamase's father asks the group if they are all her subordinates. Before anyone can answer, Takaru quickly tells Ayamine to act just like they planned earlier. When Tamase sees them whispering to each other, she gets nervous and scolds Ayamine, telling her to stop messing around and keep walking. Ayamine is already annoyed. Takaru goes to visit Kazuki and finds out that she's decided to take action about the HSSD issue. She tells him that he'll keep training like normal and they'll collect his data as usual. Takaru gets inside his Fubuki and starts using his maneuvers without any hesitation. He moves smoothly and confidently. After finishing his training, he tells Kazuki that the new system feels a lot smarter. Hearing this, Kazuki decides to use the data they gathered for the upcoming trials. For the next mock battle, Takaru asks Kazuki to install her newly developed Control OS into his team's TSFs. Once they start using it, the TSFs turn out to be way more responsive and easier to control compared to the ones still running on the old OS. Afterward, Takaru tells Kazuki that in the original world, she had started writing some strange formula. Hearing this, she immediately pressures him to try and remember it. She keeps pushing until he focuses hard to bring it back. Later, Takaru suddenly has a flashback of Sumika. He remembers how she used to stay up waiting for Santa Claus, so he would always tell her that Santa doesn't visit girls who don't sleep at night. Then he would give her a toy and tell her that if she holds on to it, Santa will come back for sure. Back in the present, Takaru wakes up and realizes that today is the day of the mock battle. Afterward, Takaru gets back into his Fubuki for a mock battle against Sakaki. Before they start, Sakaki complains to Kazuki, saying that sending them out with a new OS like this is risky and not a good idea. Kazuki tells her that the new system is made to make things easier for them, not harder. Once the battle starts, Sakaki uses her flying mode, but the system boosts it so much that she can't control it properly. She ends up flying high into the air, struggling to keep control of her TSF. However, Takaru tells Sakaki that she needs to get used to the new system, since the boost in response time will cause some wild movements. At the same time, Maya reminds Tamase to hold her position and not let Shiragene's quick maneuvers throw her off. After that, the team begins their fight with Takaru, and they all try to work together to push him out onto the wider street where they'll have a better chance. Because of Tamase's sharp shooting skills, Takaru figures she'll probably try to take a shot from a long distance. Meanwhile, Tamase starts to notice that Sakaki and Ayamine aren't moving like they usually do, but she still believes that as long as the enemy gets in her sight, they'll definitely win. The moment Takaru appears in her view, she quickly fires, but the shot misses. Maya instantly realizes that the shot came from Tamase, which means the person they've been targeting is actually the wrong one. While Maya and Makoto handle Sakaki, Takaru changes course and starts going straight after Tamase. However, Tamase starts panicking and gets confused, so she begins shooting wildly in all directions. Then, out of nowhere, Takaru shows up and quickly shoots her lower limbs, taking her out of the match. Meanwhile, Maya and Sakaki are in a fierce fight. Maya goes in close and aims straight for Sakaki's neck, but right at that moment, Takaru yells at Sakaki to dodge. She listens and manages to avoid the hit just in time. Right after that, Takaru takes the chance to shoot Maya, hitting her engine hard and causing serious damage, which knocks her out of the match. After the mock battle ends, Takaru follows Kasumi into Kazuki's office, and when he steps inside, he sees a mysterious man already there. What surprises Takaru the most is that the man somehow knows his name, even though they've never met before. The man introduces himself as Sakon Yoroi, and Takaru can't help but wonder who this strange and intense guy really is. Just then, Kazuki walks in and asks sharply if the Imperial Ministry of Intelligence has completely lost its manners. Takaru starts thinking that this man might actually be some kind of spy, but Sakon calmly says that he's from the Imperial Ministry of Intelligence's Second Foreign Affairs Division. He then surprises everyone by saying that he's actually Makoto's father. After that, he explains that he's there to talk about some important news related to the XG70s. However, Kazuki quickly replies that she's already getting all the information she needs. But Sakon tells her it's not that simple, and that things are more complicated than they seem. He warns them that a group inside the Japanese government called the Strategic Studies Group has been formed, and it could become a serious threat to Alternative 4. He also explains that a top priority order was recently sent out, but it didn't come through the usual command line. Instead, it went through a separate chain of command and was directed at the North American HQ of the UN Space Force. Afterward, the man walks up to Takaru and asks him how troubling it could really be to just keep an eye out for one of their own HSSDs. He also shows interest in how Takaru is even alive and wonders about the strange orders that seem to predict the future. But before Takaru can say anything, Kazuki firmly tells Sakon to leave, refusing to answer any of his questions. Later, Takaru thinks about Makoto's dad, someone he never met in the previous world, and starts to feel like things are definitely going to change from here on out. He later dreams about Sumika again, and the next day he tells Kazuki that ever since the CCSE, he's been having dreams about her from time to time. Kazuki listens carefully and then suggests that they should start paying attention to his dreams. If these dreams are connected to that other world, then she believes it's something worth looking into seriously. Afterward, Kazuki tells Takaru to go to sleep so they can observe what happens. When he falls asleep, he dreams about Sumika again, but this time he wakes up almost right away. Still, Kazuki is convinced that while he was dreaming, Takaru actually returned to his original world. She explains that during a certain point in his sleep, they weren't able to track his brainwaves at all. She also shares her theory that his original world might be trying to pull him back, and that, in theory, he could return whenever he truly wished for it. Because of this, she believes that Takaru's presence in the current world isn't stable. Takaru starts to realize that he actually has a way to return to the peaceful world he originally came from, but he feels a strong need to fix the problems in this world before thinking about going back. However, Kazuki has a different idea. She suggests they plan an experiment to temporarily send Takaru back to his original world. Her goal is to figure out how her alternate self in that world was able to solve a certain equation that's stopping her from completing Alternative 4. Moreover, Kazumi sends Kasumi to be his roommate so he can plug that USB into the port. The next day, Kazuki explains to Takaru that if he wants to return to his original world, he'll need to have a strong and clear desire to go back. She then goes on to explain 3 important factors. These are parts of how the machine was designed to help restore him to the exact state he was in before this world began to recognize him as part of it. Each factor plays a role in resetting his connection so he can return properly. Afterward, Takaru asks Kazuki why he's been living together with someone like Kasumi. She tells him that until the experiment is a success, his existence will continue to remain in flux, meaning he's stuck between 2 worlds. After that, Takaru steps into the machine and Kazuki tells him to focus hard and imagine himself in his old world. Takaru follows her instructions, and the experiment works as he successfully travels back to his original world. However, to his surprise, he ends up spawning inside Sumika's washroom, who is already busy doing her hardcore workout session. However, she punches him bad and he returns back. He tells Kazumi that he wasn't able to interfere with the other side's events. The next day, Takaru returns to the lab, and Kazuki tells him that he only has one chance to make this work. Takaru says he'll try his best, but hearing that makes Kazuki snap. She gets angry and says that people who already prepare excuses for failure will never be able to achieve anything. Her words hit Takaru hard, and he feels fired up. He promises himself that this time, he'll get it done no matter what. Kazuki then hands him a packet and tells him to deliver it to the Kazuki from the other world. She also warns him not to talk to anyone else, only her. Takaru travels back to his original world and heads straight to see the original Kazuki. He explains everything to her, telling her there isn't much time left and that she needs to believe him. Instead of doubting him, she suddenly starts laughing, saying that this proves her theory was right all along. It turns out she does believe him completely. She then asks how long it's been since he was last in this world, and Takaru tells her that it's been 3 years. She promises to give him the formulas he needs within 3 days. Later, Takaru feels a sense of relief when he realizes that in this world, there's no war, no beta, and that his mission is now complete. He knows it's time for him to return. Just then, Makoto shows up, and Takaru is surprised to see that in this world, Makoto is actually a guy. Even though he was told not to interact with anyone, Makoto asks him if they should play Valdron together. A while later, Takaru bumps into Sumika, who asks him to carry her bags. That's when he realizes she was planning to come over to cook him some dinner. Takaru tells Sumika that he's been spending a lot of time in another world and that he's busy with military training over there. However, Sumika doesn't take him seriously as she just laughs it off, thinking he's probably been playing way too many video games lately. Even though it feels nice to be back in his peaceful world, Takaru decides not to let himself get tempted to stay. He reminds himself that he can't rest until he saves the alternate world first. Afterward, Takaru returns to the alternative world, and Kazuki immediately notices that he seems like he had a lot of fun during those 3 hours he was gone. Just then, Kasumi suddenly faints again, likely from using too much of her strength and energy. Kazuki tells Takaru that Kasumi is absolutely vital for the success of Alternative 4. She goes on to explain that back in 1958, when extraterrestrial life was first discovered on Mars, humanity gathered a team of zoologists, mathematicians, and other experts to find a way to communicate with the alien life forms. However, the plan didn't work, and they weren't able to communicate at all, so the attempt quickly failed. Then, in 1968, Alternative 2 was launched with the goal of finding a new way to talk to the beta. Instead, they discovered that the beta was highly advanced and adapted way too well. Not long after, the beta made landfall in Kashgar, and then Kazuki reveals something even more shocking, that Kasumi is actually the result of Alternative 3, a project where children with psychic potential were bred in hopes of connecting with the beta. Because of this, Kasumi can read mind, and she also serves as Takaru's anchor, also keeping him connected to the alternate world. Takaru then asks if that means the war won't truly end until one side is completely destroyed, but Kazuki explains that the purpose of Alternative 4 is to complete the 00 unit. Once that happens, humanity will finally have a real chance to win. Takaru asks if the brain will actually be helpful, but Kazuki says Kasumi will explain that part to him later. She also admits that if it hadn't been for Kasumi, she probably would have thought Takaru was just some crazy guy when he first arrived. It turns out, Takaru is here now because of Kasumi, as if she had lost track of him as he would have been lost. Afterward, Kasumi wakes up and runs away from the room, and Kazuki tells Takaru to do whatever he wants with Kasumi as tomorrow is his break day. When Takaru hears that, he quickly runs after Kasumi, but ends up sitting alone in an empty room. As he sits there, he starts thinking about how Kasumi and Sumika are kind of alike. He remembers the time he ran into her in the old world, and how seeing her made all his memories of Sumika come back rushing. The next day, Kasumi comes back to the room, and Takaru thanks her for everything. Then he asks her if she can somehow read his mind. After that, they go to the cafeteria to eat. While they're there, Kasumi takes a bite of food and tries to feed Takaru, just like how Sumika used to do. Takaru then takes Kasumi outside because he wants to show her that there's more to life than just her mission. He starts teaching her a simple string game, something he used to play back in his old world when he was a kid. After they play for a while, he brings her to another place where they can see the ocean. While they're looking at the waves, he tells her that once there's peace, they can come here again and spend time together at the ocean. Takaru then asks Kasumi what she really wants to do, and she says she wants to read the beta's thoughts. But Takaru tells her that's not truly her wish, as it's just a heavy burden that someone else placed on her shoulders. He also tells her that once everything is finally safe and free, he wants to return to his original world. Seeing his old friends again made him feel even more determined to protect this one, and now he wants to save it more than ever. The next day, Takaru tells Makoto and the rest of the group that starting today, they will be eating separately from now on. Right after he says that a news report comes on, saying that last night a disaster relief team from the IJA was sent out to help a group of people who had gone back to their homes without permission. As Takaru watches the news report, he starts to think quietly to himself, wondering if the place they're talking about might be Mount Tengen. Takaru ends up getting into an argument with Maya about the Japanese military forcing people to leave a disaster area. Maya thinks it's wrong and says the military shouldn't be doing things that go against the people they're supposed to protect. But Takaru disagrees and says that the Japanese government just doesn't have enough resources to help everyone, so they have no choice. While they're arguing, Ayamine happens to overhear everything. She suddenly turns and runs off, and when Takaru sees her leave like that, he quickly goes after her. Takaru finds a strange and mysterious letter that Ayamine drops while running away. As he picks it up and reads it, he starts to get suspicious and begins to think that maybe Ayamine is actually a spy working for the anti-alternative group. Just as those thoughts rush through his mind, Ayamine suddenly shows up and takes him down. At the same time, in another part of the city, a group of Japanese army officers who are unhappy with how the government is handling things start to move into action and secretly begin to organize themselves. The tense moment between Takaru and Ayamine suddenly stops when the base alarm goes off, putting everyone on high alert. Takaru starts thinking if this is part of Alternative V. He quickly runs off to find Kazuki, but when he sees Kasumi, she tells him Kazuki isn't there. Takaru then guesses that she might be at the Central Command Center, so he heads there right away. At the same time, in the command center, Kazumi is told that the rebel forces have taken over the central power and water plants. Just then, Takaru reaches the center and tells Kazumi that he thinks this whole thing might be part of Alternative V. Just then, Makoto's father shows up and says the IJF has been trying hard to keep this quiet, but the news has already gotten out. He tells everyone that the coup was planned by the capital garrison, and they've done a good job taking control of the city in such an organized way. Takaru starts to feel that the mood in the room has changed after hearing this. Makoto's father then says something shocking. He says he's ready to accept losses, even if it means people close to the shogun or even his own daughter. He also points out that it's not just a random thing that the shogun's family members, the UN undersecretary, the prime minister, former IJF general Ayamine Shikaku, and even himself are all in the same place right now. After that, the rebel forces send out a broadcast to share their message. Their captain, Sajiri Naoya, speaks and says that their empire stands on the front lines of the fight for humanity's survival and that their fellow soldiers live every day struggling just to stay alive. He says he is doing what's best for the people of Japan by removing the corrupt leaders from power and asking for the shogun's support. After the broadcast ends, Takaru's instructor speaks to the group and tells them that the Ministry of Defense, which had been trying to fight back, has now been taken down. She also tells them that even though no civilians were harmed during the uprising, many important government leaders have been killed, including the Prime Minister, who was also Sakiki's father. She tells everyone that Captain Sajiri was the one who personally killed the Prime Minister and his entire cabinet. Even though Sakiki doesn't show any clear emotions on her face, deep down she is filled with anger. At the same time, the old man speaks to Kazuki and says that the UN wants to keep things steady in Japan, but Kazuki doesn't agree. She thinks it's only because Japan acts as a barrier against the beta. The old man then says that he wants to make sure Alternative 4 gets finished, but Kazuki argues back, saying that America just wants to drop G-bombs on the rest of the world and take control. She says that as long as she's around, she won't let Alternative V happen. While all this is going on, Takaru starts to worry that Sakiki might try to go after Sajiri to get revenge. Later on, Takaru meets with Kazuki, and she asks him if he remembers how the Security Council agreed so quickly, but he says he doesn't remember that happening. He then tells her that the next major event will be the announcement of Alternative V on December 25th. After that, Tamase comes in and tells Takaru and the others that the IJF has now surrounded their base. Just then, Tsukuyomi arrives and says that protecting Maya is a duty given to them by her father. Takaru asks Tsukuyomi again why the IJF forces are surrounding them, and she tells him that the soldiers being used to retake the capital are actually being pulled away from both the final and second defense lines. After that, Maya speaks up and asks if any civilians were hurt during the fighting, but Tsukuyomi tells her that none have been harmed so far. She also explains that the rebel forces are waiting for Her Majesty's support, which could be given at any moment. However, she warns that the longer this takes, the more time the IJF must gather their strength again, and the chances of the United States stepping in will get higher. Later, Takaru goes to speak with Ayamine and asks her if he can really trust her. Instead of answering right away, she gives him a letter. The letter is from someone named Tsushima Shuji, but Takaru says he doesn't know who that is. Ayamine then tells him that Tsushima Shuji is the real name of Sajiri Naoya. After that, Ayamine tells Takaru that she has a connection to Sajiri through her father, who was once a general. She explains that her father was executed because he refused to follow orders and instead chose to save a group of civilians. She also shares that lately, people from Kosean, who say her father saved their lives, have been sending her letters to thank him. Not long after, the 207th receives orders to get ready and move out, as fighting has now started in Tokyo. While Takaru and the others are heading out, their instructor contacts them and informs them that the battle has already reached the capital. She says that shots were fired at the royal guards inside the castle. Later, Sajiri gives the order for a ceasefire, but even with that, the situation remains serious and unstable. Takaru has a private conversation with Maya, who seems worried. She shares her fears with him, saying that she's anxious about what might happen to her sister, the shogun. Later, Takaru reaches the Sadagashima fortress, thinking it might be the place where the shogun is staying. As he looks around, he suddenly spots two people who seem completely unharmed, so he quickly raises his gun at them. But one of the women scolds him sharply for pointing a weapon. Then, from behind the woman, who looks like Maya, steps forward and Chief Yoroi also shows up. Takaru asks Yoroi who these people are, but before he can answer, the other woman says that the girl beside her is called Kobin Yuhi, and she is Her Majesty. Yoroi then explains that Her Majesty is the title used for the head of state in the Empire of Japan. He also reveals something surprising, that Yuhi, who looks a lot like Maya, is the shogun. Meanwhile, at the western gate, the commander is furious that the shogun has already left the capital in one of those underground tunnel trains. The Japanese commanders quickly decide to send a unit to go after the shogun right away. But Kamaki turns to Sajiri and asks if he really believes the intel he gave them can be trusted. Sajiri replies calmly, saying that they should have already expected Her Majesty to leave the city. Meanwhile, on the other side, Yoroi speaks with Takaru and tells him that he was the one who leaked the information about Her Majesty escaping. But what surprises Takaru is that it wasn't a mistake. Her Majesty herself ordered Yoroi to leak it. The plan behind this is clear. If the rebel forces go after the shogun, then the IJF and the UN will also follow them, and that will help bring an end to all the fighting happening in the capital. Yoroi then looks at Takaru and asks if he understands everything he just explained. After making sure, he tells Takaru that his next job is to escort Her Majesty safely to the Yokohama base. He also asks if it would be possible for Her Majesty to ride in Takaru's TSF for the journey. After giving the instructions, Yoroi turns and walks away. At the same time, Maya, the rest of the group and their instructor are hiding inside their Fubuki units, waiting for further orders from Kazumi. Meanwhile, Her Majesty is already seated inside Takaru's Fubuki, ready for the next move. Takaru is then informed that contact with the Atsuji base was lost 10 minutes ago, and that the enemy is currently fighting in the Myojingatake area. Because of this, the new plan is to move toward the Shirahama coast as their next destination. Takaru realizes that everything is happening all because of him changing the future earlier, but he still has to resolve it. After that, the instructor tells Takaru that their most important mission right now is to make sure Her Majesty, the shogun, is safely escorted to the Yokohama base. While this is happening, Maya and the others are busy fighting off the rebel forces. During the mission, Sakaki pushes Takaru to move faster, but he tells her that his main focus is to protect Her Majesty above all else. Surprisingly, Her Majesty herself then tells Takaru to speed up as well. Just as everyone gets ready to make a jump forward, they are suddenly attacked from behind by an unknown enemy, catching them all off guard. As the rebel forces start getting closer, and the situation becomes more dangerous, an American unit led by Major Walken arrives just in time. They step in and help hold back the rebels, giving Takaru and the others the chance they need to make their final sprint to safety. After they manage to escape, Her Majesty speaks to Takaru and tells him that she actually has some training with the controls, since she is the supreme commander of the military and has logged about 90 hours flying a TSF. Takaru is shocked and realizes that she is on a completely different level, even higher than anyone else he's seen. Then, Her Majesty asks him if the commander of the 19th Independent Royal Guard flight that's traveling with them is Tsukuyumi. Right after that, she also asks if there is a Takamikazuchi unit among them, and Takaru suddenly understands that Takamikazuchi must be the personal unit that belongs to the shogun. After that, Her Majesty quietly says that when they first met, Takaru called her by the name Maya, so she wants to know why the Takamikazuchi unit isn't with them. Takaru explains that Maya chose not to use it because she doesn't want any kind of special treatment. Hearing this, Her Majesty reveals that she is actually Maya's twin sister. She then asks Takaru to give Maya one of her dolls in her place. Takaru, surprised, asks why she won't give it to Maya herself. She explains that the bond between her and Maya is a secret that the rest of the world must never know. Just then, Yuhi suddenly loses consciousness from the strong G-force during the flight. But even in that state, she still manages to tell Takaru to keep going fast because if he slows down, it could mean the loss of countless lives. However, Takaru starts to worry, thinking that motion sickness isn't something to take lightly, as it can actually kill a person if it gets too serious. If something like that happens to Her Majesty, it would cause a huge blow to national morale and lead to even more fighting between humans. Just then, someone informs him that an enemy force has moved through the old Mishima city and has now reached the Haikawa toll booth. Takaru realizes right away that Haikawa is the critical point for their mission, and the situation just got a lot more dangerous. Meanwhile, someone reports to Sadagashima and his squad that they failed to recover Her Majesty, and even the reinforcements ran into UN forces at the West Odora interchange. After hearing this, Komaki prepares herself and tells Sadagashima that she'll go ahead, but he needs to hurry and rescue Her Majesty. At the same time, Tuko and the others begin to reflect on the situation, feeling strange and unsettled that their combat test for the new operating system has ended up being used not against the beta, but against other human beings. Tuko then turns to Missy and says that the enemies will be arriving soon, but Missy replies that they don't have to kill them. Just then, Izumi shows up and reminds them that they are Valkyries, the sharpest edge of the sword that protects all of humanity. She says that it's their duty to carry out their missions, no matter what those missions are. Right after that, they all charge forward toward Komaki and her squad. Meanwhile, Sadagashima has his squad ready, and then he tells everyone that the Americans and the UN are in process of getting away with Her Majesty. He believes that they can't let Americans have Her Majesty and decide the future of their own country. Meanwhile, Takeru's instructor tells Tsukuyumi that Her Majesty hasn't slept at all since the insurrection began, and she boarded a TSF that was to engage in combat maneuvers in that state. The instructor informs everyone that any further pursuit should be physically impossible, as they will limit TSF movement and prioritize Her Majesty to recover. Meanwhile, Takeru remembers what Her Majesty had told him earlier, that in the Kuban family, there's a long-standing belief that twins are a sign of misfortune that could tear the world apart. Because of that belief, Maya was adopted by distant relatives and raised separately. From a young age, she was trained to be Her Majesty's body double, living a life in the shadows. Takeru had asked Her Majesty if she had ever spoken to Maya directly, but she said that even now, Maya is being used as a piece in political games, forced to play a role she never chose. Her Majesty wonders if Maya might be angry at her, but Takeru tells her that when Maya saw the news about what happened at Mount Tengen, she wasn't angry at her, as she was furious at the situation. Back in the present, Wakan gives Takeru the order to give Her Majesty a sedative, so they can keep moving forward without risking her health any further. Meanwhile, Komaki is still fighting with the Valkyrie squad alone, so she informs her squad not to let them lure them somewhere, being their aim here is to buy time. Izumi, on the other hand, tells her squad to use their maneuverability to throw them for a loop. Afterward, they charge at them and eventually kills most of their robots because of their new OS. However, Komaki charges at Takahara and slashes it into two pieces. After that, the battle between the two sides becomes even more intense as they begin to clash with full force. Meanwhile, Takeru holds back, unsure about giving the sedatives to Yuhi. Tsukuyumi steps in and warns him that because Yuhi hasn't slept properly and is already exhausted, giving her sedatives now could harm her health even more. She suggests they stop and let Yuhi rest for a while, which causes both sides to pause and creates a tense standoff. At that moment, Marimo speaks up and adds that if the public finds out Her Majesty was drugged without a real need, it could spark even stronger anti-American feelings and make the situation even worse. After hearing Marimo's warning, Wakan loses his cool and bursts out in frustration. He says that instead of serving as the key strategic point in the Far East theater, this country is now stuck in a pointless civil war, throwing away precious resources and wasting time they can't afford to lose. Takeru also starts to feel the weight of the situation and realizes deep down that this isn't the time for humans to be fighting each other. While all this is happening, Izumi and her squad are pushing themselves to the limit, fighting with everything they've got in the middle of the growing chaos. Takeru doesn't know what to do and just waits until Yuhi wakes up. When she does, she tells him to give her a sedative so she won't hurt anyone and to help keep people safe during the fight. At the same time, Naoya sends out another group, this time with Sayoko as the leader, to try to break through a weak spot in the UN's defenses. But things don't go as planned because they get stopped by the Valkyries, a strong UN team known for being the best. A tough battle starts, and even though both sides lose people, the Valkyries are stronger. In the end, they beat the rebel group completely and Sayoko is the only one left alive. The attack is just a distraction, because Sadagashima bravely drops himself and his troops behind the UN's lines, cutting off the 207th's way out. He then gives the UN a message, saying they have 60 minutes to hand over Yuhi to him before the fight starts again. While this is happening, Takeru feels upset with himself for hesitating and starts to question why he still doesn't have the strength to do what he believes is the right thing to do. Meanwhile, Tamase bumps into a blonde girl who turns out to be in the American Army, so she quickly says sorry to her for everything. As she stands there, she starts thinking about something from her past, where her dad once told her that people say he's selling out Japan to other countries. Tamase's dad also told him that if they really want to protect Japan, they need help from the American military. Back in the present, The blonde girl tells her name and says she's actually from Finland. Tamais looks confused and asks her why she would join the American army if she's from Finland, and she explains it's all for citizenship. Tamais asks the blonde girl if her family made it through okay, and she tells her that her mom and sister are still alive, but her dad signed up to serve and went missing on the North Karelian front. Because of that, she now wants to fight the beta just like her dad did, so she can protect her family too. After saying that, the girl finally shares her name, Irma, and then tells Tamais that she should come visit Finland with her father someday. But after hearing all this, had something to do with starting the coup just to get the American forces involved. After that, Takaru shows up too, but Irma walks off while Tamais explains to Takaru that Irma is fighting to take back her homeland, even though it was her father who kept pulling people like her into this whole mess. Later, Takaru visits Yuhi and she tells him that if things had gone differently, all of his amazing TSF pilot skills and the support from others would have been fully focused on fighting the beta. But then she asks him if he really wants to see all of that wasted in a conflict like this. She also warns him that he's going to face even more tough choices ahead and tells him not to hesitate when those moments come. Takaru tells her that humanity's collective focus should be getting rid of the beta, and worrying about Japan's future can wait until after that. But then Yuhi asks Takaru what's making him doubt his patriotism, and he explains that everyone in his squad has their own unique story and struggles. But even with all that, they're still fighting for their country. After hearing his words, Yuhi tells Takaru to gather everyone there. Once they're all together, she bows in front of them and thanks them for everything they've done for the country. She then decides to speak with the soldiers one by one, starting with Sakaki. She tells Sakaki that her father was a loyal subject, which makes Sakaki really happy. After that, Yuhi goes around and talks with the others, showing her appreciation and thanking each of them for their hard work and effort. After that, Yuhi gives everyone a comforting speech, saying that once the coup is over, she plans to make big changes and take a stronger role in leading the government. Then she turns to Tsukuyomi and asks her to bring her Takamikazuchi. Right then, Maya shows up and says that the job of talking with the insurgents should be hers. She explains that, since she looks exactly like Yuhi and represents her, she feels it's her responsibility to take on this important task. Maya offers to act as Yuhi's body double, so she can go and negotiate with Sadri instead of Yuhi herself. After that, Takaru speaks up and tells Wakan that it would be a smart move to place the shogun's body double in his unit, especially since there's a chance the enemy has already figured out that the shogun is with them. It turns out that Wakan agrees with Takaru's idea and supports the plan. Later, Tsukuyomi records a message and sends it, asking for a reply so they can start a proper discussion. In the message, she tells Sadri that Her Majesty wishes to speak with him. After hearing that, Sadri steps out of his robot and politely introduces himself to her. Then Takaru, Maya, who is still disguised as Yuhi, and Tsukuyomi head out to meet Sadri face to face. During their conversation, Sadri explains that the whole situation got worse because of a conspiracy that seems to benefit America. He says there's talk that one of their own soldiers started the fight, but after they investigated it, they found out that the man was actually working for an American intelligence agency. During the meeting, Maya speaks sincerely and appeals to Sadri's sense of honor, and because of what she says, Sadri agrees to stand down. But just as things start to calm down, Irma suddenly shows up and, looking like she's been brainwashed, launches an attack on Sadri's soldiers. Her surprise attack breaks the ceasefire and throws everything into chaos again. As the fighting breaks out between both sides, Takaru tries to escape with Maya to get her to safety. But then, in the middle of the chaos, Irma snaps out of her brainwashing, wondering what she was even doing. At the same time, Wakan gives orders to Takaru's instructor and the others, telling them to regroup and take down anything that stands in their way. Suddenly, Tamais and the others come under fire from a distance, but Irma and her squad show up just in time. Irma's teammate suddenly turns on her and kills her, shocking everyone and leaving Tamais completely traumatized by what she just witnessed. Right after that, the same teammate raises her weapon and fires at Takaru. It's then revealed that the shooter is actually a traitor, and Wakan quickly steps in to confront him. But before Wakan can stop him, the traitor disables his safety lock and makes a run for it, forcing Wakan to chase after him. Meanwhile, Takaru notices that Maya isn't wearing her heavily armored suit and tries to say something, but she tells him not to worry about her. At the same time, the traitor tries to escape, but before he can get far, Sadri shows up and cuts him down. Wakan goes to face Sadri, but because the traitor messed with his TSF, Wakan is taken down and killed really fast. Sajiri keeps chasing after Takaru, and even though Chizuru and Kei try to stop him, they can't do anything to hold him back. Then Tsukuyumi steps in and talks to Sajiri, saying that his rebellion already showed the world how corrupt the government is, and that things will start to change because of it. She tells him that since he did that, she'll let him have an honorable death in battle. Sajiri knows he's going to die no matter what, so he accepts it and gets ready for one last fight. In the end, Tsukuyumi kills him with her sword. After Sajiri dies, the rebel forces give up and surrender, and things slowly go back to normal. Yuhi makes a promise to fix the government so that something like this doesn't happen again. The 207th takes time to mourn the people they lost, and after everything they've been through, they finally finish their training and officially become full TSF pilots. At the same time, Kazuki starts planning with Sakan as Alternative 4 moves forward to its next phase. How long do you think it'll take for Takaru to rewrite humanity's doomed future? Drop TSF in the comments and let us know your thoughts. Make sure to like and subscribe the channel for more.